Hey YouTube, it's Caleb with Olympus Reptiles. So you had a little sneak peek of Matt being back for a couple days where we filmed a live and some egg cuttings. He's gone again, so I'm back to taking over social media. Today we're going to talk about something a little different. We always talk about ball pythons and the other snakes we have, the rattlesnakes and things like that. We don't have a lot of oddball animals that aren't necessarily animals with legs. Today we're going to do that. So these here have legs. These are called river painted terrapins, and these guys are critically endangered. Probably one of the most critically endangered turtles you could ever find. There's actually, the last study on populations that I could find was in 2018, and there was less than 500 females left in the wild. So incredibly endangered. Now here we have two. The really cool thing is they are sexually dimorphic. Now as they get older, it's more when it's sexually dimorphic, not necessarily at this size. But if I had to guess, I'd say we have a good chance of having a male-female. And I say that because as adults, they'll look more like this one here when they're female. All this rusty black and gray and greens. Whereas the males will have this whitish color, and when they're full grown, their shell will be almost all white with 3 black dots, and then their head will be vibrant red. So based on this now, this one turning pretty light already, I'm gonna guess we have a male and a female. Now this one, as it gets older, could lighten up and turn out to be male. And if so, that's okay, because they're not like some reptile species where you can't have males together. You can't. There's fighting involved. Turtles are, while can be aggressive together, are much more peaceful, right? You usually when you go to the lake, you see a log, there's like 20 not sea turtles, but red-eared sliders, right? So very easy to cohab even with males. But I'm gonna guess we have females. And even if we have 2 males, that's okay, because I know where I can get a female. And the goal of this is going to be to breed, obviously. Now I also got them because I really liked them. If I do have 2 males, that's actually okay, because I also want to have one for education, and I don't necessarily want to use one for education that is breeding. I don't want to disturb their habits. The cool thing is most turtles have a ton of eggs. These guys, as far as terrapins and turtles go, lay small clutches, about 10 to 11, whereas you have others that lay up to 36, and then you have sea turtles that lay like 100 or something like that. 12, they only get 12, which is part of the reason that they are critically endangered. They don't reproduce very fast, and so when they have habitat destruction and things like that, there's not a large replenishment, so it's easier and they're more susceptible to things like predation. They're being stolen for market for the meat. If a female is found, it's more than likely going to be taken by like a farmer or something like that, who could turn around and sell it for a boatload of money. Now all of these were all legally acquired. These are captive bred, so not taken from the wild, not hurting the wild populations. Now what can I do in Kansas breeding do to help a species from Malaysia that is critically endangered? Because I can't obviously just release it back in on my own, right? That's just not a thing you can do. There are lots of things that actually people don't really think about that the hobby does for things. One, education, right? So we talk about, when me and Curtis went to a nursing home or retirement home, and we talked and showed snakes off to all of them, and they really enjoyed it. And a lot of them, I was really worried. A lot of older folks typically have the mindset of the only good snake's a dead snake, right? So when you teach someone to love something, they want to care about it. So the goal for education for these guys would be to teach people to care about these animals, and then they'll start to learn about them and want to save them. Secondly, you can take off pressure from wild populations even if you're not releasing them. So if you're breeding them so much and they're abundant in captivity, they end up being not really rare anymore. Now there's going to be way more in captivity than there would be in the wild, but then that takes away the need or the drive for people doing that illegally. Because why buy it illegally when you can just buy it cheaper, not illegally? Makes sense to me. The other thing that can be done is I have talked to people, and I've in contact with certain people, and I could start a rehabilitation, where I send babies to this person, and then they take care and make sure they're released into the wild properly and all the right channels for that. So that is another way we could help with conservation. The perfect example of what the reptile hobby does for conservation is crested geckos. I believe it was in 94. I don't remember the exact year. I think it was 94, but in the 90s, crested geckos were thought to be extinct. And then in like 2 or 3 years later, we found them on a small island, and now they're one of the most popular gecko, I should say, because it kind of varies on when you narrow it down. But one of the most popular pet geckos in the industry. They're almost as common as a dog or a cat now. And so you have something that was thought extinct, and now you can see it just as often as you'd see a dog. So a lot of people think that zoos are the only way for conservation. And while they are a really, really good way, and probably some of the best ways, it's not always the case. You know, they don't have all this money that they can fund to every single project, right? So they do what's called blanket species. So, you know, protecting this species kind of protects a lot of other species just by proxy. Whereas us as hobbyists can have 1 or 2 species that we can dedicate a lot of time and energy to that a zoo wouldn't. And then, you know, they rebound a little bit better. And that's not a knock on zoos. Zoos have tons of animals and species they have to worry about. And let's be honest, in the zoo world, you know, while it might be for me and you watching, reptiles aren't a big draw to zoos. They're not what we would call money makers. And so because of that, there's less efforts on the zoo side of things. Now that's not saying like zoos are for profit and for money and blah, 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 but to be able to fund your projects, to be able to fund all the conservation and all the work you're doing, you kind of have to be a little bit about money. So if I'm going to work on breeding something like, I don't know, reticulated giraffes that bring in millions, or little turtles that might bring in 1,000, right? Gonna go for that giraffe because, you know, that giraffe won't need all those millions, then they can fund that other project. So while zoos are going to be more broad-based, the hobby is needed for things like this. So I'm really excited to have these guys. These are actually more for me than they are anyone else. I had the chance to nab some, and I could not say no. I absolutely love these guys. They look a lot like the fly river turtles on the face with the little pig nose, but they're not related to them. And you can see they actually have real feet and not like flippers. They do come up on land sometimes. Now they are more majority water turtles, or terrapins, I guess I should say. And the other cool thing is these guys eat solely fruits and veggies. So no fish, no bugs, nothing like that. And most of the things they will munch on are from like the fruits that fall from the tree. And as soon as it splashes the water, to them, they think that is food. So there's a lot of keepers who have these that I've talked to who will say, careful making a big splash when you put your hand in the water, because they may come on and knob it. And while these guys right now probably wouldn't leave a big mark, when they get much bigger, like red-eared slider size and bigger like they're supposed to, that would hurt quite a bit, because they have some gnarly chompers on them to be able to break through the skin and rind of fruits. But I'm really excited to have these guys. Curtis, do you have any questions?
So how big can they get?
How big can they get? That's a really good question. That's not something I really touched on. So on average, they're going to get about the size of a dinner plate for the males and a little bit bigger for the females. So you're talking kind of like how, and some of you may not believe this because you haven't seen them, because the vast majority of red-eared sliders are not properly cared for. And Curtis can attest to this, we've had some nasty, huge-sized red-eared sliders brought into the shop to surrender. So when they're well taken care of, I mean, they get dinner plate size. So you're talking a little bit bigger than a red-eared slider for the most part. So nothing absolutely crazy. My end goal for these guys would be to have my own Cayman exhibit. I say exhibit. I'm used to saying that. So like in the zoo field, saying cage is not necessarily against the rules, it's frowned upon. We like to say habitat or exhibit because it just looks better and sounds better to the general public instead of, oh yeah, let's go look at the monkey cage or whatever, right? It sounds better. Just like, I don't know if they've actually done it, but a few years ago they were talking about changing the name of zookeepers to animal caretaker because zookeepers sounded derogatory in some sort of way. I really don't care, to be honest. I will still call it a zookeeper. But I would like to have my own little caiman habitat and have these guys in them. And really I'd like to have 3. And this one let's see this one. I think this one here. Nope. So, well, I'll take this one out to show you. But on the bottom, this one has what we call a split scoop. So it's just kind of a little bit deformed there. If it's a male, it won't affect its breeding at all. If it's a female, it could. So in which case, this one may end up being just for education only anyways. But I'd love to have 3 or 4, just 1 or 2 for one for education, then like a trio to get some eggs from. Just because again, they don't have that many babies. And the really cool thing about them too that I didn't really touch on is most species of reptiles or animals in general just breed once a year and they lay eggs and then they're done, or give birth or whatever, they're done. These guys have 2 breeding seasons. So they have a spring breeding season where they'll lay eggs, and they have a fall breeding season, which again, you'd think would be advantageous to be successful in the wild. But since they have 12 eggs at the max, you're talking that's 24 babies split up over 2 times of the year, whereas red-eared sliders will drop 45 of them in one time. So it sounds like a lot, but it's really not in comparison. So any other questions? Nope. All right, guys, we'll slide on over to Patreon and talk about something that I'll come up with by the time that happens.